Hello, everyone. Today's story is about an embarrassing accident on the very first day of university that turns into an unforgettable connection. I think you'll enjoy this romantic, warm, and intriguing story all the way to the end. Are you ready? Then let's begin. I have kissed exactly one person in my life before today, and that was Tommy Reardon at a 9th grade birthday party, and it lasted approximately 1 second, and we both agreed afterward that it never happened. So I want you to understand the full context when I tell you that on the very first morning of my very first day at Hartwell University, I accidentally kissed the most terrifying, magnificent woman I had ever seen in my entire life, in front of approximately 40 witnesses, with a large iced coffee exploding between us. Let me back up. My name is Mia Calloway. I am 18 years old. I am studying communications because I genuinely had no better plan. I am carrying a tote bag that says, "I'm fine" on it in ironic block letters. And I am already 40 minutes late to the freshman orientation because the campus map they sent us was, without exaggeration, drawn by someone who has never been to this campus, or possibly any campus. I had been walking in a tight, increasingly panicked circle around the central quad for 20 minutes before I gave up on the map entirely and decided to just follow the largest group of people I could find and hope for the best. The largest group of people I could find was gathered in a loose, reverent semicircle near the steps of Caldwell Hall, which I later learned was the main academic building, the most photographed building on campus, and the unofficial throne room of Nora Whitfield. I didn't know any of that yet. I only knew that there was a bottleneck on the steps, and I was late, and I had a very full iced coffee in one hand and my totally useless campus map in the other, and I was trying to navigate through the crowd by sheer momentum and the power of social anxiety. I squeezed between two people, apologized to a third, pivoted around someone's very large suitcase cart, and then I ran directly into something solid and warm and devastatingly present. And I tripped on the edge of the bottom step, and the world tilted. I fell forward. She turned just at that exact wrong moment. Our mouths collided. It was brief. It was absolutely catastrophic. My iced coffee went sideways, and cold liquid cascaded down between us, and I grabbed the nearest stable thing I could find, which turned out to be her blazer lapel. And for one horrible, suspended second, we were pressed together on the steps of Caldwell Hall, with our lips touching and coffee everywhere, and the entire assembled population of Hartwell University watching us in complete silence. Then I stumbled back, grabbed the railing, and looked up. She was tall. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant knot at the nape of her neck. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer over a black turtleneck, and her eyes were the kind of gray that looks less like a color and more like a weather condition. And she was staring at me with an expression so controlled and so utterly devoid of anything readable that I genuinely could not tell if she was about to call the police or simply disintegrate me with her gaze. There was a coffee stain spreading slowly down the front of her blazer. I said. She said nothing. I'm so sorry, I said. I tripped. I didn't mean to. That was completely accidental. I was trying to get to orientation, and I had the map, but the map is wrong. It's genuinely wrong. Someone made a mistake on that map. "You have coffee on your face," she said. Her voice was low and very precise, like she measured each word before releasing it. I touched my own cheek. There was, in fact, coffee on my face. Someone in the crowd behind me laughed. Someone else whispered something, and then the whisper traveled outward in a ripple, and I heard a name pass through the crowd like a current. Nora. Nora Whitfield. That's Nora Whitfield. Oh my God. Did she just... I looked back at the woman with the ruined blazer and the gray eyes, and the expression of someone who had never been surprised by anything in their life until approximately 30 seconds ago. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning," I said, very sincerely. "I'll pay for anything. I'm so sorry." She looked at me for one more second. Then she reached into her bag, removed a folded cloth handkerchief, an actual linen handkerchief, which I didn't know anyone still carried, pressed it briefly to her lapel, and walked away up the steps without another word. The crowd parted for her like water. I stood at the bottom of the steps, soaking wet, holding my now nearly empty coffee cup, and a girl appeared at my elbow with bright red-framed glasses and an expression of pure, delighted horror. "Oh, honey," she said. Do you know who that was?" Her name was Priya. She became my best friend within approximately 6 hours. She was also the one who explained, during orientation, during lunch, during the walk back to the dorms, and again over dining hall pasta that evening, exactly who Nora Whitfield was. Student council president, top of every class she'd ever enrolled in, pre-law on a full academic scholarship, interning at a downtown firm at the age of 17. Won a regional debate championship 3 years running before she even got to university. Her father was some kind of judge. She was on the cover of the campus magazine last year in a black dress and an expression that suggested she found the entire photo shoot mildly beneath her. She had turned down the head of the university's lacrosse team in front of the entire student union. She had never, to anyone's knowledge, had a relationship of any kind. She did not attend parties. She attended lectures voluntarily for subjects she wasn't even enrolled in. "She is basically a myth," Priya said, gesturing with her fork. "A very elegant, very frightening myth. And you kissed her." "I did not kiss her. It was an accidental collision." "Your mouths touched. That's not in front of like 40 people." "I know. It's already on the group chat." I put my face in my hands. "Which group chat?" "The freshman one. Also the general campus one, I think. Someone got a photo." I lifted my face from my hands. "There's a photo." Priya turned her phone toward me. There was, in fact, a very clear photo, slightly blurred from distance but unmistakable. Me, stumbling forward, grabbing Nora Whitfield's lapel, our faces close enough that anyone looking at it would not immediately understand that this was an accident. "I need to transfer schools," I said. "You've been here 8 hours." "I know, I've ruined it." "Or," Priya said, in a tone that suggested she had already made up her mind about something, "you are now the most talked about freshman on campus. That's another way to look at it." I did not want to be the most talked about freshman on campus. I wanted to be an unremarkable, comfortable, medium-sized presence who learned things and made friends and got through 4 years without incident. That had been the plan. That had been the entire plan, and it was now functionally destroyed before I'd even unpacked my room properly. That night, I lay on my new dorm bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about the way she'd looked at me. Not with embarrassment, not with irritation exactly, though there was probably some of that. Just this long, measuring look, like she was filing me away somewhere, like I was a data point she hadn't expected to encounter and wasn't entirely sure what to do with yet. I told myself to forget it. I told myself firmly that this was a large university and I would probably never see her again. She was a third-year student council president who voluntarily attended extra lectures and owned linen handkerchiefs. I was a first year with a wrong map and an ironic tote bag. These orbits did not naturally intersect. I saw her the next morning. She was in my communications theory class. I walked through the door, spotted her in the 3rd row, and immediately turned to walk back out. I walked directly into the door frame. The professor looked up. Several students turned around. Nora Whitfield, who had been reading something on her laptop, looked over her shoulder and our eyes met. She turned back to her screen. I found a seat in the back row, 4 rows behind her, and spent the entire 75-minute lecture staring at the back of her perfect, severe, tidy knot of hair and trying to absorb information about communication theory, while my brain functioned at approximately 12% capacity. After class, I gathered my things and tried to leave quickly. I was almost at the door. Calloway. I stopped. The room was emptying around me. I turned slowly. She was standing at the end of the row, bag over one shoulder, watching me with that same unreadable calm. You know my name, I said, which was not the most articulate sentence I've ever produced. It was in the group chat, she said, along with everything else. I felt my face go very warm. I really am sorry. About yesterday. About the coffee and the... I made a vague gesture that was supposed to indicate the kiss, and instead just looked like I was swatting at a small invisible insect. All of it. It happened, she said simply. I'm not interested in discussing it further. I am interested in whether you read the Carrie chapter before today's lecture. I blinked. The required reading? Yes. What did you make of it? I stared at her. I had been prepared for irritation, dismissal, maybe a formal complaint to the student conduct office. I was not prepared for a seminar discussion. I thought his model of communication as performance was convincing up to a point, I said slowly, because apparently my mouth was going to answer, even while my brain was rebooting. But he doesn't really account for the way intention and reception diverge in practice. Like, you can perform something perfectly and still be completely misunderstood. She looked at me for a moment. Something moved in her expression, too quick to read. Interesting, she said, and walked out. I stood in the empty classroom for a full 30 seconds before I followed. Priya nearly fell off her chair when I told her. The next 2 weeks were a kind of low-grade, beautiful torture. I saw Nora everywhere. Not because she was following me. I was fairly certain she simply occupied a disproportionate amount of the campus's most prestigious spaces, and I was now hyper-aware of her presence in a way that made my nervous system register her before my eyes did. In the communications seminar, she sat 3 rows ahead and asked questions that made the professor light up like a lamp. In the library, she occupied the same corner table on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, with a precision that suggested she'd probably reserved it contractually. I walked past her once in the hallway near the science building, and she gave me a brief, measured nod, the kind you'd give someone you knew but hadn't categorized yet, and I walked into a trash can. She saw that too. The campus had not forgotten the photo. If anything, it had taken on a kind of mythological quality. People I'd never met knew who I was as the girl who kissed Nora Whitfield, which was both more and less accurate than I wanted. A boy in my sociology class asked me about it with genuine awe, like I had accidentally punched a god and survived. Priya thought the whole thing was the best thing that had ever happened to anyone. She keeps talking to you, Priya pointed out, over coffee in the campus cafe one afternoon. She doesn't talk to anyone. She barely acknowledges that other people exist. She asked me about a reading assignment once. She remembered your name from the group chat. That's Mia. Priya looked at me with great patience. She remembered your name. I stirred my coffee and said nothing, because the truth was that I had been thinking about Nora Whitfield at a frequency that was starting to interfere with my actual academic functioning, and I was not ready to say that out loud where it could become real. She found me in the library on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks into term. I was at a table near the back, surrounded by communication theory notes, and the beginning of what I privately knew was a panic spiral about my first essay assignment. I heard the chair across from me pull out and looked up. She set her bag down and sat, and opened her own laptop with the calm of someone who had not just chosen to sit at my specific table in a library with approximately 50 empty ones. There are other tables, I said. I'm aware. She didn't look up from her screen. I looked down at my notes. I looked back up. Did you need something? I'm working. She paused. You look like you're panicking. I'm not panicking. Your notes are in 4 different colors and none of the sentences are finished. I looked at my notes. She was entirely correct. The Hartley essay, she asked. Yeah. Your argument about performative communication from the lecture was a better thesis than whatever you're trying to build from those notes. I stared at her. You remember that? She didn't answer. She just turned her laptop slightly so I could see her screen, where she had a very clean, very organized essay outline. Start with your claim about intention and reception diverging. Then use Hartley as the complicating factor. Then bring it back to your original point with a real example. I looked at the outline. I looked at my notes. Something clicked, quietly and efficiently, like a key turning in a lock. Thank you, I said, genuinely. You're welcome, she said, and went back to her work. We sat across from each other for 2 hours. She didn't speak again except once, when she pushed a bottle of water across the table toward me without looking up, because I'd been rubbing my eyes in a way that apparently communicated dehydration. I said, thank you. She didn't respond. When I left, I realized I'd written 400 words of the best essay I'd managed since arriving at Hartwell. I also realized, walking back to the dorms in the early evening cool, that something in my chest had shifted from panic to something warmer and more complicated, and I wasn't sure when that had happened exactly, but I was fairly sure I was in trouble. It was the rain that broke things open. It came in fast, the way autumn rain does on the eastern side of the country, and I was caught completely unprepared on the far side of campus after a communication society meeting ran long. I ducked under the overhang of one of the older buildings, the Arts Annex, pulling out my phone to check the weather app as if the weather app was going to offer solutions rather than just confirmation of how wet I was about to get. Callaway. I turned. Nora was standing 10 feet away under the same overhang, a slim umbrella in her hand, looking at the rain with an expression of mild inconvenience. Oh, I said. Hi. You don't have an umbrella. I do have an umbrella. It's in my room. That's not what having an umbrella means. I know that. She looked at me for a moment. Then she held out the umbrella without ceremony, the gesture so clean and direct it took me a second to understand what she was doing. You'll get soaked, I said. I can wait. I have a hood. She was wearing a dark coat with a large hood, that which she was not using, because it was not yet raining directly on us. Take it. Nora. Don't argue with me about an umbrella. I took the umbrella. Our fingers overlapped for a moment on the handle. Neither of us moved immediately. She was very close. I could smell something clean and faint, like cedar and paper, and her gray eyes were darker in the low pre-storm light, and she was looking at me with that careful, contained expression that I'd spent weeks trying to decode. Thank you, I said, and my voice came out softer than I meant it to. Something shifted in her face, small and fast. Then she pulled her hood up, stepped out into the rain with characteristic composure, and walked away without another word. I stood under the overhang, holding her umbrella and feeling like the entire world had just leaned 3 degrees to the left and not corrected. I told Priya that evening. Priya sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the whole thing with her hands folded and her expression intensely focused, like a detective receiving key evidence. She gave you her umbrella, Priya said. Yes. She let herself get rained on so you wouldn't. She had a hood. Mia. She let herself get rained on. I pressed my face into my pillow. I don't know what any of it means. It means she likes you. The pillow muffled my response, which was something between denial and terror. The thing is, I had begun to understand, slowly and then all at once in the way these things tend to go, that I was falling for Nora Whitfield in a way I had never fallen for anyone before. Not Tommy Reardon, not the girl in my high school art class who I'd admired from a comfortable, safe distance for 2 years and never spoken to. This was different. This was a daily, ongoing, completely involuntary process of noticing everything about her. The way she held a pen, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was listening to something she found interesting, the way she very occasionally almost smiled, just the ghost of one at the corner of her mouth before deciding against it. But Nora Whitfield was untouchable. That was the word that kept surfacing. She existed on a different plane of the campus social atmosphere, elevated and precise and self-contained. And I was the girl who had run into her with a coffee cup on the first day of term and become, apparently, a campus anecdote. Whatever was happening between us in these small, quiet moments, the library, the classroom, the umbrella, It felt too fragile and too improbable to trust. I was probably reading too much into a few acts of mild, pragmatic kindness from someone who was precise and organized about everything, including apparently managing freshmen who seemed likely to fall downstairs. That was what I told myself, right up until the night of the Student Union Gala. The gala was the big autumn event, organized by Student Council, and the whole campus dressed up, and the hall looked genuinely beautiful. And Priya had basically physically forced me into a green dress and done my eyeliner and told me I looked like a person who deserved good things. I felt okay. I felt nervous, but okay. I did not feel okay when I walked in and saw Nora across the room in a black dress, hair down for the first time I'd ever seen, dark waves falling past her shoulders, talking to a man I didn't recognize who was leaning toward her with the unmistakable body language of someone who thought very highly of his own chances. I got a drink from the bar and tried to talk to people and not look at her. I succeeded for approximately 8 minutes. Then Priya, who had left to find her own date, appeared at my elbow, and her expression was doing something complicated. "Okay, so," she said, "there is something I need to tell you, and I need you to not react visibly." "What?" "There's a rumor going around." "What kind of rumor?" "The kind that involves you." She paused. "And a bet." I felt the drink in my hand go very still. "What?" "I heard it from 2 different people tonight. Apparently, someone is saying that the whole thing, Nora being nice to you, the library, the umbrella, all of it, was because of some kind of dare or bet from the 3rd-year honors cohort. Like a joke about the freshman who kissed her on the first day, that she's been humoring you for the entertainment of it." The room was very loud, and I could hear all of it at once, and none of it. "That's not," I started. "I don't believe it," Priya said quickly. "I'm just telling you what's going around." I looked across the room at Nora. She was still talking to the leaning man, but her eyes swept the room in that habitual, steady way she had. And for a fraction of a second, they found mine, and she went very still. I looked away. I put down my drink. I told Priya I needed some air. I didn't wait for her response. The corridor outside the hall was quiet and cool, and I walked to the end of it and stood by the window and told myself to be rational. It could be nothing. Campus gossip invented narratives constantly. That was practically the campus's primary industry. But the thing about rumors is that they don't need to be entirely true to land with full force, and this one had found every quiet insecurity I'd been carefully maintaining about the distance between Nora Whitfield's world and mine, and it had set them on fire all at once. I was a joke, or I might be a joke. And the humiliating part was that it would have made complete sense because why else would someone like her have given me any attention at all? I was ordinary. I was the girl with the wrong map and the coffee catastrophe and the ironic tote bag. And she was the myth, the cover photo, the person the crowd parted for. Footsteps in the corridor. "You left." I kept looking at the window. I needed air. "It's a corridor. There's no air." "Nora, I'm fine." "You're not." She came to stand beside me, not close, but close enough. "What happened?" I turned to look at her. In the dim corridor light, she looked less like a myth and more like a person, and that was somehow harder to manage. "Is it true?" I asked. The words came out quieter than I intended. "The thing people are saying, that this has all been..." "What are they saying?" "A bet. A joke. That you've been talking to me because it was funny. Because of the photo. Because I was..." "No." The word was flat. Clean. Absolute. "No. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" My voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I resented it. "Because I genuinely cannot read you, Nora. You look at me, and then you don't. You show up in my corner of the library and give me essay advice and your umbrella, and then you walk away like none of it means anything. And I'm standing here trying very hard not to be an idiot about it, and people are saying..." "Mia." She said my first name. She had not said my first name before. It stopped me completely. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. I nodded. She looked away from me, at the wall, at the window, somewhere in the middle distance. It was the first time I had ever seen her look like she didn't know exactly what she was doing. I don't do this well, she said. Any of this. People, connection, She paused, searching for something. The ordinary texture of caring about someone. I'm very good at control. I understand systems, arguments, strategies. I don't understand this. She made a small gesture between us. I have been trying to understand it since you fell into me on those steps. And I am not any closer to having a clean answer, and that is not a state I am comfortable with. She looked back at me. But I know it isn't a joke, she said. I know that when you're not in the seminar, I notice it. I know that your argument about intention and reception has come back to me approximately every day since you said it. I know I gave you my umbrella because the idea of you walking home in the rain was... She stopped. Unacceptable, she finished. And the word was careful, but the thing behind it wasn't. I looked at her. The corridor was very quiet. That is not the vocabulary of someone who is humoring a campus punchline, she said. I don't know what to do with it, but I know what it isn't. My heart was doing something complicated and very loud. Say something, she said. You said you'd let me finish. You've been quiet for 20 seconds. I'm just, I said, trying to process the fact that Nora Whitfield just told me she notices when I'm not in a room. Something happened at the corner of her mouth. The almost smile, except this time it actually happened. Small, controlled, like she'd decided to allow it. It's inconvenient, she said. For what it's worth, I said, and my voice was steadier now. You have been completely destroying my ability to focus on communication theory for 6 weeks. So, there's that. The smile grew by a fraction. I took one step toward her. She didn't step back. Can I ask you something? I said. You're going to, regardless. That first day, I said, on the steps, after I fell into you and the coffee went everywhere, you looked at me for a long time before you said anything. What were you thinking? She was quiet for a moment. Outside, distantly, the gala music continued. I was thinking, she said, that you had the most genuinely mortified expression I had ever seen on a human face, and that you were still apologizing even though you had coffee on you too, and that I had never... She paused, and this pause was different from her usual ones, softer at the edges. I had never been looked at the way you were looking at me, like I was a person who might also be inconvenienced by the situation, not a name or a reputation, just a person with ruined dry cleaning. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out warm and surprised. She watched me laugh with an expression I couldn't name, something open in it, something that looked like relief. Nora, I said when I'd stopped. Yes. I would very much like to actually kiss you. On purpose. If that's... Yes, she said, before I'd finished the sentence. I crossed the remaining space between us, and this time, when our lips met, it was nothing like the first time. It was slow and deliberate and very warm, and she kissed me back with a precision that somehow also managed to be gentle, and her hand came up to the side of my face. And everything that had been tangled and uncertain for 6 weeks went, very quietly and completely, still. When we separated, she kept her hand against my face for a moment. Considerably better than the first time, I said. The bar was low. There was a lot of iced coffee involved. I want it noted, she said, that I never blamed you for that. You stared at me like you were considering it. I was considering several things. The corner of her mouth curved. That was one of them. We walked back into the gala together. Priya saw us come in and made a sound that could only be described as vindicated, and then had to pretend she wasn't looking at us, which she did very badly. Nora got us both water from the bar. She never drank at events, she told me. Yes, she needed to be able to remember everything. And we stood together against the far wall and talked for 2 hours. Really talked. The kind where you keep finding new threads and following them, where time operates differently. She told me about the debate competitions, about her father, about the year she'd spent genuinely not knowing what she wanted to study before she landed on law, about the way she'd built the precise, controlled version of herself as a response to a childhood that had been considerably less neat. I told her about being ordinary, about always feeling slightly adjacent to the right version of myself, about choosing communications because it was the closest thing I could find to a course called How to Make Yourself Understood. She listened to all of it with her full attention, yet which was the most disarming thing about her, I was discovering. When Nora Whitfield listened, she actually listened. None of the half-present social performance of listening. She was entirely there. "You're not ordinary," she said when I'd wound down. "You're contractually required to say that." "I'm not contractually required to say anything. I also don't say things I don't mean. You know enough about me to know that." I looked at her. 6 weeks of trying to read her expression, and right now it was the most open it had ever been, and it was looking directly at me. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay," she agreed. The weeks after that had a different quality to them. Not simpler, exactly. Nora was still Nora, still precise and guarded in public, still somewhat alarming to other people in seminars, still the kind of person who would rather revise an essay 4 times than submit something she was only 90% satisfied with. But there were these private coordinates that were mine. The specific way she turned her laptop screen so I could see her notes without being asked, the way she always texted back within 3 minutes even though she professed to find phones an interruption, the way she kept my umbrella in her bag for weeks after the rain because, she told me plainly, I had failed to demonstrate sufficient umbrella preparedness, and she wasn't going to be caught without a contingency plan again. Campus still talked about us, of course. The photo had been replaced in the campus group chat by new material. Someone had spotted us leaving the library together at closing time. Someone else had seen us at the far table of the campus cafe with our notes spread between us like shared territory. Priya monitored the campus gossip with what I could only call proprietary satisfaction, sending me screenshots with minimal commentary, usually just a single exclamation mark. Nora found one of the screenshots on my phone one evening when I left it on the cafe table and read it with an expression of complete neutrality. "People have a lot of time," she observed. "You are genuinely the most talked about person on this campus. Anything you do is news." I find that exhausting. Does it bother you that people know about us? She considered this, honestly, the way she considered everything. "No," she said. "What happens between you and me is not diminished by other people knowing it exists. It's not their business. But it's not something I'm ashamed of." She paused. "Are you?" "No," I said immediately. "God, no. I've been telling Priya everything since day one. I'm the least subtle person alive." She almost smiled. "I've noticed." "Is that a complaint?" "No." She looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup. "It's one of the things I find," she seemed to choose the word deliberately, "compelling." "Compelling," I repeated. "High praise from you." "It is, actually." I knew by then that it was. I had learned the language of her, slowly and with attention, the way you learn a language you have decided is worth the effort. The mild deflections that meant she was feeling something she hadn't organized yet. The directness that other people read as coldness and I now read as the most honest form of tenderness she had, like the one she deployed only when she was sure. The way she sometimes just sat close to me in comfortable silence, her shoulder against mine, and didn't feel the need to fill it with anything at all. I had stumbled into her. Literally, physically, catastrophically, with a large iced coffee and approximately 40 witnesses, and the whole disastrous opening chapter of my university life unfolding all at once on those steps. And now, here we were, 4 months into term, sitting in the campus cafe with our notes overlapping and our shoulders touching, The autumn outside deepening into early winter cold, the windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside. "I have something to tell you," I said one evening, out of nowhere, as we were packing up to leave. She paused, looking at me. "I'm glad I dropped my coffee on you," I said. "I know that's a terrible thing to be glad about, but I am." She was quiet for a moment. "I took the blazer to the dry cleaners," she said, "the afternoon of the first day." "I know. I offered to pay." "I know you did." She zipped her bag. "I never took it to the dry cleaners again after that. The coffee stain is still there." She looked at me, level and steady. "I kept it." I stared at her. "You kept a ruined blazer." "I told you I don't say things I don't mean." I crossed the space between us and kissed her, right there in the cafe, softly and without any coffee involved this time, and she kissed me back with that quiet thoroughness that still made my heart rearrange itself in my chest every single time. When I pulled back, she was looking at me with the expression that I had come to recognize as hers alone, and the one she reserved for no one else, open and steady and warm in a way the rest of the world didn't get to see. "Mia," she said. "Yeah? You were never ordinary." She said it the way she said everything that mattered, without decoration, without hesitation, with the full weight of her attention behind it. "Not for a single day. You just hadn't found the right map yet." I laughed, and she smiled. A real one, the kind that reached her gray eyes and changed them entirely. And outside the cafe windows, the first early snow of the season had begun to fall, soft and unhurried, settling over the Caldwell Hall steps and the whole improbable, magnificent map of this campus where I had stumbled and fallen and, without any plan at all, landed in exactly the right place. I took her hand. She let me. We walked out into the snow together. And this time I didn't need a map at all.